Hey there, explorers. Welcome back for another adventure. I'm Brian, and this time we'll examine what people do for work. The earliest form of work takes us way back to the Old Stone Age. Early humans lived in caves or simple shelters and were strictly hunters and gatherers when it came to food. Their tools were basic. They just had rocks, sticks, and bones with very little craftsmanship. They had a rock for bashing, one for mashing, another for slashing, and so on. Life was simple. Hunt, gather, eat, sleep, repeat. For over 2 million years. But around 12,000 years ago, that began to change. Humans saw that plants could grow where they discarded their waste. They learned about the domestication of plants and animals. During this time, humans got better at creating tools. Well, they still used rocks and sticks, but they made better tools by polishing and crafting them into points and making spears and arrows. They learned how to plant crops, which meant that they had a more reliable food source. It took a couple thousand years, but by 8000 BCE, the New Stone Age, humans planted many different crops and kept animals like dogs, goats, and sheep. Rather than traveling around to hunt, they could stay put near their crops and developed new tools which would help them build sturdier homes. Advancements were even made in areas like weaving, sewing, and pottery, meaning clothing and housewares improved as well. Life was good. According to historians, it took humans around 2.5 million years, give or take a few, to move from hunters and gatherers to farmers and herders as primary methods to gather food. Specialization occurred soon thereafter in ancient cultural hearths like Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and China, allowing some individuals to trade for food in markets rather than growing it themselves. And of course, this all leads us to today's trips to Kroger and Walmart to scan the breakfast aisle and pick up one of the 2,000 cereals that you've seen ads for on TV. We've come a long way in the last 12,000 years, and today we'll uncover how goods like food, furniture, and ideas end up within our reach. Ready, explorers? Our learning goals for today are to define the 4 sectors of the global economy, to classify specific activities into the appropriate sector, to define the terms developing, emerging, and developed nations, and relate them to the sectors of the economy. All economic activity is grouped into 4 sectors: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Of course, fancy words for first, second, third, and fourth don't sound very creative, but it has to do with each sector's relationship with natural resources. Let's start with the primary sector. Primary economic activity refers to the extraction of raw materials from the earth. Farming is the most important and most prevalent primary economic activity. Whether it's growing crops, fungi, or livestock on huge commercial farms or in subsistence gardens, all of it is considered primary economic activity. But as you learned in our natural resources lesson, plants and animals aren't the only natural resources that humans extract from the environment. Can you come up with another example of primary sector work aside from farming? Pause the video and answer in your lesson guide. That's right. Other primary economic activities include hunting, fishing, forestry, and mining. All of these activities involve taking resources from the earth, whether those resources are crops, animals, minerals, metal, lumber, renewable or non-renewable. Each one features humans harvesting raw materials from the lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere. Secondary economic activity is the processing of the raw materials produced in the primary sector. Many people call it the manufacturing sector. It includes both cottage industry and commercial ventures. Cottage industries are often home-based and always small-scale. In ancient civilizations, those included someone who made pottery, weaved rugs, created clothing, or ground corn into meal. If you've ever bought something on Etsy, it's probably a cottage industry product. Commercial industries are also included in secondary economic activity and are much more common today. Those are large-scale businesses that employ many people and mass-produce identical products. Examples include a furniture factory that turns wood into tables and chairs, or perhaps one that turns iron ore into steel to be used in home appliances. Take a second to look around the room. Can you find a product made by the secondary sector? Is it a cottage industry or commercial product? Jot down a response in your PDF. Maybe you said the table or desk you're using to work on your lesson guide is a secondary sector product, and if your family got it from a big furniture store, it's probably a commercial product. Speaking of a big store, that's a great example of a tertiary sector activity. This sector is nicknamed the retail sector. Tertiary activity is the sale of manufactured goods. Okay, it's the sale of raw materials too if you want to get picky, but most retail stores sell manufactured goods nowadays. So when you head to the grocery store to get that tasty cereal, you'd be involved in tertiary activity. From here, the sectors are different depending on who you ask. Some people say there are only 3 sectors and that anything that isn't a primary or secondary sector activity belongs in the tertiary sector. But the numbering system is based on the relationship to natural resources, right? So what if someone's job has nothing to do with natural resources? What about a teacher like me, an explorer like John, a sensei, a business consultant, or a doctor? This is where the quaternary sector comes in. For some, this is called the service sector. That would mean that it involves completing a task like dog walking for someone instead of offering a tangible product. For others, this is called the information sector, which means that it involves the transmission of intangible products and services. A rabbi would be a good example of this. Take a minute to come up with your own example of a tertiary sector activity and quaternary sector activity in your lesson guide. Understanding these sectors will help us describe the economic development of countries we visit this year. Knowing which sector people work in helps us to understand the standard of living and average income of people within a society, which are indicators of their access to international products and the influence they have around the world. In this framework, all countries are sorted into 3 categories: developing, emerging, and developed. There are 2 measures commonly used to determine which category a country belongs in. The first is called Gross Domestic Product, or GDP. This is a measure of what people produce in a country. This map shows GDP per capita. The data shows that US, German, and Australian citizens are very productive, while the people of Central Africa are less productive in terms of economic output. Another litmus test is per capita income, a measure of how much money people earn. On this map, you can see that developing countries are red, emerging countries are yellow, and developed countries are green. People in developed countries make more money each year than people in emerging and developing countries. This allows them to buy more things and is an indicator of a high standard of living, a high life expectancy, and access to international products. Developing countries typically have a larger share of people working in the primary and secondary sectors, and developed nations often have very few people working in the primary and secondary sectors at all. Less than 10% of a developed nation's workers are secondary sector workers, and typically fewer than 2% are primary sector workers. This is a meaningful distinction moving into the 21st century as many primary and secondary sector jobs are being automated. Humans are less effective than machines at many tasks, so investment in service and information industries is key for success in the coming decades. What about where you are from? Is your nation of origin a developing, emerging, or developed nation? Pause and respond in your lesson guide. As we continue in our study of geography, it'll be important to consider the ways in which people work and trade in their community, their nation, and with the rest of the world. Per capita income is a major indicator of the way people live, from their housing to their methods of transportation and from the food they eat to the clothes they wear. How do people support themselves where you live? How much do they rely on natural resources to put food on the table? How do they access the things they need? These are just a few questions you can ask to help make the world around you come alive. Remember to ask questions, be curious, and until next time, keep exploring.
Hey, hey.